So again, I was just starting to prepare I was supposed to be teaching on the 13th. So I was just starting to get prepared for that lesson. And then things came up with Brother Gingerich again. You can't control things like that. And obviously, he's where he needs to be with his family, and stuff like that's going on. So when they say you need to be ready, Neil, batter up next time. Zach, he's pointing to Zachary. All right, Zachary, batter up next time. Be calling on you. You never know when you need to be ready. So, but I kind of went back through. I wasn't really prepared for that lesson since I just started it. But I kind of went through and took a lot of the notes and stuff that we've been going over for our young adult Sunday school class. Again, I'm not going to reteach the Sunday school class from the last month and a half we've been doing it. But there's a lot of information that I didn't have time to really go over. There was a lot of information that we looked at, and there was a lot of information that, frankly, we just didn't have time to get through. So there was a lot of notes that I had, so it took some time to get through the first lesson. If I would have used all the notes I had, we'd still be on lesson number 1. So, but there was a lot of good information, a lot of good information that, looking at it, it wasn't necessarily, it's a lot there. It's geared towards the young adults, that 18 to 35. But there's a lot of information there that's usable for all of us, whatever age it is. And there's a lot of it is relevant to what we need and what we're seeing today. So if you're not familiar, we've been teaching from the book Life Quest from Carrie Schmidt. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, anybody's read it or not. But it's a very, very good book. Not just for young adults, but I mean for anybody in general. So as we've been looking through it, going through, we've been, you could see, I guess, a trend or a pattern that's been continuing from generation to generation. Unfortunately, not a good trend. Each generation has been moving further and further, or farther and farther, depending on which one word you want to use there. I don't know which one's more appropriate, either further or farther, but getting away from God. God has not changed, and he is still moving, and he's still working through us individually as we'll allow him. But look around, man has turned its back on God and stopped trusting and even denying him. We look around and we see, you don't look too far and see how far we have just our generation. Look back to the generation before us, how far our generation, I'm not talking about necessarily us individually, but generally as a generation, we are continually moving away from God. Now we're seeing pockets of people that are coming back. We're seeing. I was kind of looking through some dates, like when prayer was removed and Bibles were removed and the 10 Commandments were removed from the schools. I think it was 62. Prayer was removed. It used to be they would pray at schools, public schools, and that was removed. I think it was in 62, if I wrote it down right. Bibles were removed. They used to, learn to read from Bibles, or they would read scripture in public school. 1963, that was removed. It was deemed as unconstitutional, because the separation of church and state, right? So it was unconstitutional, against the First Amendment. Seems kind of backwards, right? But that's what it is. And then I think if I got it right, 1980, the 10 Commandments were removed from schools. And then in the last several years, we've been seeing 10 Commandments removed from, municipal buildings, federal buildings, whatever kind of, state buildings, things like that. They're being removed from those places. Anything that has any reference to God's being removed. Little by little, God has been removed, and we wonder why our country is the way it is. Why we don't have that trust and faith and belief in God. Again, I wrote down the dates here. But each generation blames the next generation for the problems. Have you ever made the comment, this new generation, I don't know what is wrong with these people? Well, guess what? Our parents were saying the exact same thing about us. and their parents were saying the same thing about them, and so on and so forth. It's always been the same way, and it probably will always be the same way to a certain extent. But I mean, you look at it today, and it really makes you wonder what's going on. But it's still that trend of getting away from God, not trusting in God, not believing in God, all of those things. I mean, that's what it is. But each generation blames the next generation. But what are we teaching them? What examples are we giving to the next generation? We blame them for the way that the things that they're doing, and then we don't set good examples for them. We don't give them an example of who they should follow, where they should go, how they should trust God. And I'm saying as a whole. I'm not saying as individually. If you are, then you need to get it fixed. But as a whole, as a group, as a generation, that's what we've been doing. What kind of examples are we setting before them? It shouldn't surprise us with the way they act, with the examples that we set before them. Again, this doesn't excuse the type of behavior we're seeing. We all need to be responsible for our actions. Bad situations, simply put, bad parents, bad role models, bad examples, all of those things, they don't excuse the wrong that takes place and the wrong things that go on. We still need to be responsible. You can see countless examples of people that were brought up in terrible, terrible, terrible situations, and they turned their life around, and they are doing something positive for the Lord. There's countless examples out there. So when somebody says, well, I can't help it, it's where I came from. Yeah, you can help it. You don't allow your circumstance to rule your life. Allow God to work through there and bring you through it. But too many times we want to play the victim because it's easier, right? And unfortunately, that's what we see. But then I listed a few things here, and some of these are from the book that I wrote down. So look at some of the examples we're giving, and then we've passed along. We've taken away their God. Think about it. Go back to 62, right? We've taken God out of schools. Not allowed to pray. Again, they're allowed to pray privately, but it's frowned upon, right? Somebody is praying. I know when I was going to school, of course, I was not brought up in a Christian home. There was no only talk of God in my house was when it was using a swear word, unfortunately. But if I were to see somebody praying in school, it would have been very odd to me. What is wrong with this person? Because I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. I was ignorant to that fact. And think about it, if you were raised in a public school, someone praying was very weird to you if you were not, if you did not go to church, if you did not know God, if you did not have a relationship with God. It was strange. But we've taken away God, taken them out of schools. We've taken them away from everything that our kids deal with. Unless they're in church, there's no mention of God. We've told you and we've taught you that you evolved from nothing. Evolution's being taught, right? Being forced in public schools to be taught evolution. And you can say, okay, well, just go along with it, and you just don't have to agree with it, but you still have to go through it. Doesn't it still kind of put that thought in your head? Well, what? Impressionable people. Well, I mean, kind of makes sense. If you really don't think about it too hard. But I mean, it's completely contrary to the Word of God. We know God created everything. God spoke everything into existence. So, it's at the very beginning of his book. He created everything. But we have told and we've taught multiple generations that, you don't need God and God doesn't exist. God didn't create everything. We've shown you horrible examples of marriages and family. Think about it. The divorce rate is all-time high. What have we shown the next generation as a whole about marriage? Okay, as soon as it gets tough, you get a divorce, you get an annulment, and you move on to the next person. Or we've showed them, why do I want to deal with that? They look miserable. Why would I want to be married? We'll just be in a relationship, and if it gets hard, we'll just move on, right? That's the example that they see. They're not seeing good examples as a whole of why they should get married, why they should work, why they should fight for their marriage, why they should fight for their relationships. It's just easier to move on to the next person. We've taught you that it's okay to be with anyone at any time for any reason, and we can do it safely. We can sleep around, run around, do whatever we want, and there's no consequences, right? That's what the world tells you. And I talked to somebody that's gone through those measures, that's aborted a child. You can't tell me that they don't have regrets about what they did. You can't convince me that you don't have regrets, doing those things. But there's pills for it. There's all kinds of things to be able to get rid of the consequences for your actions, right? But the world has said there's no problem because there's a way to take care of that. You don't have to worry about the consequences. You don't have to worry about the responsibilities. We can get rid of it. And, it's for a lot of different things. But the world says it's okay. Don't have to worry about it. We'll figure it out and we'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about the consequences or the responsibilities of it, right? We've become disillusioned with our jobs and careers. Now, again, I'm thinking about this, and there's days that I am disillusioned with my job and my career. Just to be truthful for you, there's days I do not want to get up and go to work. I have no desire to go do that job, none whatsoever. God says, get your lazy hind end out of bed and go to work. You got a job to do. You made a commitment. You got to go to work. You have bills to pay, right? But, think about it, working that 9 to 5, that drudgery, you come home, if you have kids and you're coming home every day, you come home and you're miserable. I hate this job, and every day is just a coming home, sitting down on the couch, and it's just that same old pattern every day, day in and day out. Why would your kids ever want to go out and get a job if that's what they have to look forward to? Let alone go out and get a career to try to do something. Why would you want to do that? You wouldn't, right? If that was the example you had before you, why would we want to live like that? Nobody wants to live like that. That's why it's important to find out where God wants you to be. Now, again, is it always going to be an ideal situation? Are we always going to be in our dream job? That's why I told the girls, I said, work the jobs you have now so that when you have another job, you appreciate that job so much better. People that are working at McDonald's, now there's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. If that's where God wants you, that's where you need to be. But you shouldn't strive to be just at McDonald's the rest of your life. That may be perfect for somebody. And there's a lot of people that work at McDonald's, but I guarantee most of them don't want to be their career job where they're retired from. We should probably want to go on and strive to do something a little more challenging, right? So we've taught you that life is just about fun. Isn't that the world today? Now think about it. If God is not in your life, if God does not exist, if God did not create you, and we are just here out of pure chance, then what's the point of life? Growing up, I heard this saying. It was, live your life, I'm trying to remember how it goes. The one who dies with the most toys wins. I always thought that's kind of dumb. Sounds to me the one who has the most toys left their family members in debt. So they're dead, but now their family members left with all the debt they had for all their toys. But that's what it's about. The world today, pleasure, right? Going out and doing what you want to do when you want to do. And you see that all around today. Everybody's just looking for the next thing, the next game, the next whatever, the next toy, the latest and greatest video game, or, talk about boats. And in itself, none of those things are bad. But if you're putting over top of or in front of God, in front of your relationship with God, then they're bad. In moderation, there's nothing wrong with it unless it's, hurting your relationship with God. But that's what the world looks at today. Everything is geared around fun and pleasure and living my best life, right? No thought about God, no thought about telling, let alone in your own life, let alone leading somebody else to Christ. We've taught you to take the path of least resistance. Think about it. Hopefully, you allowed your kids to struggle a little bit. But you see a lot of times today, the kids are not, parents don't let their kids struggle at all. They give them everything they need, give them everything they want, and then they wonder why when they turn 18, 19, 20, 30 years old, they wonder why they don't have the best of everything in the world. We were talking about this last week in class, about, kids, and I've heard, younger kids say this, they're in, late teenagers, early 20s, and look at somebody that's in their 50s, 60s, 70s and has something really nice, whether it be a car or something, maybe whatever it is, and they look at them and say, well, it must be nice. Well, yeah, it is nice. Do you have any idea how long that person worked to be able to get that item? They may have worked somewhere 30, 40, 50 years to be able to get to the point where they could buy that item. And you have somebody that's 25 years old thinks that they should have that too. I look at something, I think I even made the comment that it is frustrating when you're driving down the road and you see somebody that's a little bit older and it's driving something really, really nice, and you pass them in your beater and they're like, man, the nice vehicles are always wasted on people that don't know how to drive these things. But, and then I roll it back like, well, they're older. Let them enjoy. They have nowhere to go, apparently. So they're just taking care of it because it took them a long time to get it. But yeah, I mean, we look at people that have these things, but we don't see the struggle that it took to get to that point, to be able to own that, to be able to be in that situation, to be like the Heartlines and go on vacation every other week. But just certain things like that. I mean, it took years to get to that point. It wasn't something where it was just handed to. So, again, I wrote this down. If there is no God and our existence is purely accidental, then what is the point of trying? We've shown that marriages and families are not worth fighting for, so why get married? The way we despise and dread the repetition of our jobs definitely doesn't inspire others to get a job, let alone pursue a career. We have bought into the thought that life is simply about fun and the pursuit of what makes me happy. We've made the comment, you'll have the rest of your life to work, have fun while you're young. There is some truth to the fact of being able to experience things before responsibilities come. When you think about it, what's that saying? Go and sow your wild oats, right? They even have that in the Amish community. Before they turn a certain age, they're allowed to go out and roam in the world, as they say, and make a decision whether they want to join the church. I think it's Rumspringer or something like that. I think that's the way it's called, if I'm pronouncing it right. But that's what they do. They send them out into the world and they make a decision whether or not. I don't know that that's really a great decision, right? But that's what the world says. Go out and live your best life. I mean, there is something to the fact of while you don't have the commitments of a family, being able to go out and experience things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that when you don't have the responsibilities, but you still got to make sure you're living up to your commitments and the responsibilities you have, right? See here. But unfortunately, many are avoiding responsibility and commitment so that they can pursue fun. We see many of them are like that, right? No work, no drive, no whatever, no desire. They're just living their best life, or so they think. We need to get back to teaching that God is real and is the creator of everything, including all of us. Marriage is for life, so we need to wait for God to show us who he wants us to be with. Then we start a family. Isn't the world completely backwards, right? We just do what we want when we want, and we'll just worry about the results later. Not prepared. We're not ready. We're not where we should be or where God wants us to be. Work is necessary, and if we allow him, God will show us where he wants us. Work is important so we can support ourselves, our family, and it helps us to grow in our responsibilities and commitments, and gives us a desire to grow and to do better, to grow into different places. See where God is stretching us out into different areas. There's places where I'm sure, most of us started out in one area, and you look back at your life and see where you're at, and you're like, that was definitely God. There's no way I could be here in this place without God's help. There's no way. You look back and you see how God is leading us. But this also should be our ministry to our coworkers and the people around us. We need to be a light to them, and we need to draw them to Christ. Think about it. Your workplace is also your ministry, or it should be your ministry. An example, anytime you get to be able to lead somebody to Christ, you should take advantage of that. While life is not only about fun, we should have fun and enjoy the life God has given us. Enjoy those things that God has created and take advantage of opportunities to introduce others to Christ. The time that we have here is very limited. Remember, it was a while ago, Zachary brought a lesson on, our life is just a vapor, right? Now, we've heard that before. But the time that we have is limited. The older you get, the more you realize how short your life is, right? Especially when we get on the other side of it, and we're starting that downhill slide. When there's more days behind us than there is ahead of us. And again, we never know when our time's going to come. So we need to take advantage of it. Every situation, struggle, trial, or difficulty we face is an opportunity to grow and mature. It is also an opportunity to see how God works and meets our needs, right? I mean, we grow, and I think I talked about this the last couple of weeks. We grow through our struggles. If things are going easy, we still grow through them, but we don't grow near as much as we do going through the struggles. Especially seeing how God brings us through them. How God meets those needs, whatever the case is. So we're finally going to get to Psalm number 1. So while Psalm 91 is not particularly relevant to the Sunday school lesson, it is a psalm of security in God. Over the last several generations, we have gone farther and farther from God. We are to the point where God has no place in our life, definitely does not have a position of security or protection. So hopefully by this time you guys have got to Psalm number 91. So we're going to read through this. So starting in verse number 1, it says, "He that dwelleth in the secret places of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord." Now, I guess before I move on, look at that. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. How close do you have to be to somebody to be able to hide in their shadow? You're going to have to be pretty close. And you're not going to be able to abide in God if you're way out in left field, unless he's showing his full might and his full strength. He's not going to cast that big of a shadow. You guys, we're going to have to be close to God to be able to abide in his shadow. That means we get close to God. We stay close to God. We don't veer away from God. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. Does anybody know what a snare is? What's that? It's a trap. So I think if I remember right, it's like a loop. They would hang from something, a branch or a stick or something. It's a loop, and they would put their foot in it, and it would pull it up, I think. I think that's what a snare is, but it's a trap. But it says here, surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler. So to be able to be delivered from a snare or a trap, where do you have to be at? Not a trick question. To be delivered from the trap, don't you have to be in the trap, right? Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. So we see here, surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler. That means sometimes we're going to be in the snare. Sometimes we're going to be in difficult situations. But God is saying he's going to deliver us from the snare, from the difficulties, from the situations. But he's not saying we're never going to be in a difficult situation, but he's going to deliver us from them, right? He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. Now again, God does not have feathers that I am aware of, but it's a figure of speech. God is going to wrap around you. Have you ever seen, the birds with feathers? I think most of them have feathers, and they keep their young under and they protect them. Again, this is just another picture of God protecting us, wrapping his arms around us, covering us completely, if we'll allow him to. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. So again, There's dangers, there's difficulties all hours of the day. When we go through troubles, are they always at the same time? Well, it's 3 p.m. Get ready. Something bad's going to happen. No, it's usually 2 a.m., right? It's when you get the call. It's when something bad happens, but it's, as he's saying here, it's any time of the day, noonday, nighttime, daytime. Be prepared. We need to be trusting in God. That's what the world has lost today, is there's no trust in God. No belief in God, but no trust in God. They're trusting in themselves. And again, that's where we struggle so much, as we put our own faith and our own trust in ourselves instead of trusting in God. We tell everybody that when you get into a bad situation, call out and trust God. Most of the time we get in a bad, difficult situation, the first thing you want to do, especially for guys, you want to try to figure it out on your own, right? But first thing we should do is call to God. But before that is when we need to be calling out to God, so that when we get into the difficult situation, it's secondhand. That's what we do. And through every situation, good and bad, we should be going to God first. Because when something bad happens, what do? We revert back to what is comfortable, what is our norm. And if our norm is to call out and cry out and trust in God, that's what we'll do through every situation. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample underfoot. Again, is anybody looking forward to stepping on any snakes or anything? I was been there, done that. Yeah, I almost stepped on. Somebody told me it was a cottonmouth, but there's no cottonmouths in Ohio that I was aware of. But I was doing a job, and I walked over, and I was looking for a line, and something moved in the grass, and there was a snake, and he was every bit of 5 feet long and about that big around. It was huge, and laying in the grass, and I got up to him, and he lunged. I'm like, this guy's not happy to see me. And then what the worst part was is I left to go get a shovel just in case, and I come back and I couldn't find him. There's one thing that I don't like. I'm not snakes. I'm not scared of them. I don't play with them. I don't pick them up. But I don't like not knowing where they're at. If I know where he's at, okay, I'm perfectly fine. But it's the thought of not knowing where he was. But then I realized there was another one. So I found the one, and then as I'm looking for the other one, I almost stepped on the other one that was in the grass. And this one was just as mad. So needless to say, I just left him alone. But so, yeah, we don't want to play with snakes. They're just not fun. If you like playing with snakes, you're weird. Period. Because he hath set, verse number 14, because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. This is all God talking. 14, 15, 6. And God is going to do all of these things. What do we need to do? I mean, what's our commitment? God's doing all of these things. We just got to trust God. Obey God. Give our life to God. We're not deserving of it, right? Nothing that he's giving us, we're deserving of. He is giving us all these things. All we have to do is accept it. And we see that's what the world is missing today. And frankly, a lot of Christians are missing that. Not talking about, the fact that they're not saved, but surely not living like God would want them to be living. They're not living the example that God would want them to live, not living the life that God would want them to live. As I stated before, Psalm 91 is a psalm of security. It's a writ of protection for all true believers. This is what the world is missing by not trusting in God. Salvation, eternal security is the key. but also the protection and security God provides when we trust in him. Now more than ever, we have placed our trust and confidence in ourselves. It's not what the world says. Just take care of number one, right? And too much of the world is like that. We're get so wrapped up in our own life that we're not worried about what's going on with anybody else. Don't care about them. I'm saved, and that's your problem, right? Your life, that's your problem. That is so backwards to what God wants. Let's see here. That is a very dangerous thing because we cannot be trusted. If we're putting our trust in ourselves, we are not trustworthy. Look back in your own life. We are not trustworthy. God says, trust in me because I know who you are. I created you. You are a wicked, wicked guy. Don't trust yourself. Trust me. I know better. This new generation is also refusing to grow up, refusing to accept responsibility and commitments. Now, I'm looking at that, and we're teaching that class. But honestly, it's not just this generation now. It's my generation too. Look back to the generations that fought in the wars, and you think of what these people were doing at the ages of 18 to 30 years old. And could you imagine even most of my generation and the generation now going through any of that? As they say, we would all be speaking a different language if my generation and the generation now was the one that was going to have to protect us. We'd be in a world of hurt. And it's because God is not involved. God is not number one. And some of that is the examples put before them, but everyone needs to grow up. Every generation, every age group. There are ones in every generation that they just don't want to grow up. They don't want to grow. They don't want responsibilities. They don't want commitments. All of those things. Let's see. Let's turn to Ecclesiastes, and we're going to finish up there. Ecclesiastes chapter number 11. See if I can find it. There we go. Ecclesiastes chapter number 11. So I skipped over 1 Corinthians 13:11. In that chapter, in that verse, Paul was speaking on spiritual gifts, especially the gifts of tongues and prophets. He was comparing that to a child about growing up. The fact that Christ had come, Christ had fulfilled the law, Christ had given us the Holy Spirit, the gifts of tongues, the gifts of prophets were no longer necessary. But he was also going on and saying how childhood is a necessary stage, but is not meant to be the permanent state of a believer. We're supposed to grow. As they say, a babe needs milk. Well, if you've been saved more than a day or a week or a month, hopefully you're striving for more than just milk. Move beyond childish traits and embrace a more mature Christ-like way of living. I wrote this down. Now that I am a man, I have done away with the things of a child. We should not be grown adults and acting as children. I'm not talking about people that are mentally ill or, mental capacity of a child. I'm talking about people that have all of their faculties and know better and still act like a child. Ecclesiastes 11 verses 9 and 10. It says, rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheerly in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from thy heart, and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. So it's going on here to say, turn from the sorrow and remorse of not wanting to grow up. Turn away from the sins that destroy so many young hearts and see the vanity of this thinking. Again, it's a warning against a life misspent in self-indulgence. We want to stay in our youthful thinking, stay in our youthful pride, stay in all of these things. And that's appropriate for a certain period of time, but we need to be growing through that. We need to be growing past that. We need to be growing spiritually. We need to be growing physically, mentally, all of those things. We need to grow, not stay in those areas of childish behavior. So I wrote down a couple things here. Where is each of us at in our growth? So think about it. I'm not going to ask you to stand up here and say, oh, I'm at third grade level. I'm 65, but I'm about third grade level. I'm doing pretty good. I've been saved for 45 years, and I'm just about to that third grade level. Okay, don't stand up and tell me that. But think about it. Where are you at spiritually? Where's your growth at? And again, no matter where you're at, you can improve. All of us, especially me. Not just growing into a mature adult, but in our spiritual life. Are we still children when it comes to our relationship with God? If we are, why? Why have we not grown past that point where we are maturing? Not mature. We're never going to be mature until the Lord brings us home. But are we maturing into Christians? Adult, mature Christians. What's our relationship with God like? Do we just talk to him when we need him? Is that mentality of, okay, well, I'll call him when I need him. Kind of like, whoever it is that you don't ever talk to him unless you need something, or if that's maybe you have somebody that only calls you and you look at the phone and their name's on it. Yep, they're in trouble. They did something stupid. They're calling me. That's the only time they call you is when they need something. So let's not be that person. Let's grow past that. Now I had a couple questions here, but I'll give you the questions and you guys can kind of do with what you want. I was going to ask, but just for sake of time. So just a couple questions to kind of ask yourself. How has culture or the world attacked our faith and tried to shake our belief in God? Think about the things that have gone on in our world and things. Maybe you have examples of things that people have done to you. I told our class a while back that I had told somebody they were supposed to be doing something. I was on a Wednesday night. I said, well, I got church tonight. And they looked at me like I had two heads. You got church on a Wednesday night? Yeah. They just couldn't wrap their head around why anybody would go to church on a Wednesday night. That's what I do. It's time for church, so we go to church, right? What responsibilities has God placed in your life that are not really fun? I would say certain days when the alarm goes off, if you're still in that situation, when the alarm goes off and you got to get up and go to work and you don't feel like it, those aren't necessarily fun days, right? Especially maybe when you don't feel good, maybe when you didn't get a good night's rest, maybe you know it's going to be a difficult day. Maybe when you have, just certain things going on that they're just not fun to deal with. What are some areas that we would say we can have now? What are some areas that the world says we can have now, but God says to wait for long-term blessings? Obviously, we would say, marriage and families would probably be the first thing, but there's a lot of other things out there. You think of the mentality, just like I said, that 20-year-old that wants to have that car that the 60-year-old has. Took him 40 years to be able to get that car, and the 20-year-old wants it now. He didn't work to get that. But nowadays, we can get whatever we want, right? Get enough debt, sign enough papers, get enough loans, get enough credit cards. You can get whatever you want, and you can get it now, and then you worry about it tomorrow. But I got what I want now. God says, wait, you're not ready for that. I want you to work up to that point so that you're going to be responsible for it. You're going to appreciate it more. So just some thoughts there. So go ahead and close at this time. Appreciate everybody being patient. Okay.